Good morning. I am Joey Haber from the Flying Tortoise Academy. Today we continue our daily workouts. Today delving into line 4 of the BaGua Linear 64 form with breakdown. We are also going to go over a bit of Cheng style ball rolling, the movement Chuan, as well as our usual ShuiJiao warm-ups. A little bit of housekeeping. I have added a whole bunch of videos per request about the breakdowns of a lot of the more simple elements used in these videos. Go ahead and check out the webpage. They're also tagged as cards in this video as well as my previous ones. If you have any other questions or comments, please be sure to add them in the comment areas. And of course, like and subscribe. Thank you all so much.
I only had to survive 18 souls. This time, things are different. I averaged 80 kilometers per soul on my way to Pathfinder. If I do that well towards Schiaparelli, the trip will take 40 souls. Call it 50 to be safe. But there's more to it than just travel. Once I get there, I'll need to set up camp and do a bunch of MAV modifications. NASA estimates they'll take 30 souls, 45 to be safe. Between the trip and the MAV mods, that's 95 souls. Call it 100 because 95 cries out to be approximated. So I'll need to survive away from the hat for 100 souls. What about the MAV, I hear you ask, in my fevered imagination. Won't it have some supplies, air and water at the very least?
Change directions.
Nope, it's got dick all. It does have air tanks, but they're empty. An Ares mission needs lots of O2, N2, and water anyway. I sent more with the MAV. Easier to have the crew top off the MAV from the hat. Fortunately for my crewmates, the mission plan had Martinez fill the MAV tanks on Sol 1. The flyby is on Sol 549, so I'll need to leave by 449. That gives me 257 souls to get my ass in gear. Seems like a long time, doesn't it? In that time, I need to modify the rover to carry the big three: the atmospheric regulator, the oxygenator, and the water reclaimer. All three need to be in the pressurized area, but the rover isn't big enough. All three need to be running at all times, but the rover's batteries can't handle that load for long. The rover will also need to carry all my food, water, and solar cells, my extra battery, my tools, some spare parts, and Pathfinder. As my sole means of communication with NASA, Pathfinder gets to ride on the roof, Granny Clampett style. I have a lot of problems to solve, but I have a lot of smart people to solve them. Pretty much the whole planet Earth. NASA is still working on the details, but the idea is to use both rovers. One to drive around, the other to act as my cargo trailer. I'll have to make structural changes to that trailer, and by structural changes I mean cut a big hole in the hull. Then I can move the big three in and use hat canvas to loosely cover the hole. It'll balloon out when I pressurize the rover, but it'll hold. How will I cut a big chunk out of a rover's hull? I'll let my lovely assistant Venkat Kapoor explain further. 1400 hours, 38 minutes, JPL. I'm sure you're wondering how to cut a hole in the rover. Our experiments show a rock sample drill can get through the hull. Wear and tear on the bits is minimal. Rocks are harder than carbon composite. You can cut holes in a line, then chisel out the remaining chunks between them. I hope you like drilling. The drill bit is 1 centimeter wide. The holes will be 0.5 centimeters apart, and the length of the total cut is 11.4 meters. That's 760 holes, and each one takes 160 seconds to drill. Problem: the drills weren't designed for construction projects. They were intended for quick rock samples. The batteries only last 240 seconds. You do have 2 drills, but you'd still only get 3 holes done before needing to recharge, and recharging takes 41 minutes. That's 173 hours of work, limited to 8 EVA hours per day. That's 21 days of drilling, and that's just too long. All our other ideas hinge on this cut working. If it doesn't, we need time to come up with new ones. So we want you to wire a drill directly to have power. The drill expects 28.8 volts and pulls 9 amps. The only lines that can handle that are the rover recharge lines. They are 36 volts, 10 amp max. Since you have 2, we're comfortable with you modifying 1. We'll send you instructions on how to step down the voltage and put a new breaker in the line. But I'm sure you already know how. I'll be playing with high voltage power tomorrow. Can't imagine anything going wrong with that. Log entry. Sol 193. I managed to not kill myself
Switch.
today, even though I was working with high voltage. Well, it's not as exciting as all that. I disconnected the line first. As instructed, I turned a rover charging cable into a drill power source. Getting the voltage right was a simple matter of adding resistors, which my electronics kit has in abundance. I had to make my own 9-amp breaker. I strung 3 3-amp breakers in parallel. There's no way for 9 amps to get through that without tripping all 3 in rapid succession. Then I had to rewire a drill. Pretty much the same thing I did with Pathfinder. Take out the battery and replace it with a power line from the hab. But this time it was a lot easier. Pathfinder was too big to fit through any of my airlocks.
All right.
I had to do all the rewiring outside.
Figure 8, external rotation.
Electronics while wearing a spacesuit.
Both hips at once.
I even had to make a workbench out of MAV landing struts, remember? Anyway, the drill fit in the airlock easily. It's only 1 meter tall and shaped like a jackhammer. We did our rock sampling standing up like Apollo astronauts. Also, unlike my Pathfinder hatchet job, I had the full schematics of the drill. I removed the battery and attached a power line where it used to be. Then, taking the drill and its new cord outside, I connected it to the modified rover charger and fired it up. Worked like a charm. The drill whirled away with happy abandon. Somehow I had managed to do everything right the first try. Deep down I thought I'd fry the drill for sure. It wasn't even midday yet.
Ball rolling.
I figured, why not get a jump on drilling? 1000 hours, 7 minutes. Watney. Power line modifications complete. Hooked it up to a drill, and it works great. Plenty of daylight left. Send me a description of that hole you want me to cut. 1000 hours, 25 minutes. JPL.
Adding in external hip
Glad to
rotation.
hear it. Starting on the cut sounds great. Just to be clear, these are modifications to Rover 1, which we've been calling the trailer. Rover 2, the one with your modifications for the trip to Pathfinder, should remain as is for now. You'll be taking a chunk out of the roof, just in front of the airlock in the rear of the vehicle. The hole needs to be at least 2.5 meters long and the full 2 meters width of the pressure vessel. Before any cuts, draw the shape on the trailer and position the trailer where Pathfinder's camera can see it. We'll let you know if you got it right. 1000 hours, 43 minutes. Watney. Roger. Take a pic at 11:30 if you haven't heard from me by then. The rovers are made to interlock so one can tow the other. That way you can rescue your crewmates if all hell breaks loose. For that same reason, rovers can share air via hoses you connect between them. That little feature will let me share atmosphere with the trailer on my long drive. I'd stolen the trailer's battery long ago. It had no ability to move under its own power, so I hitched it up to my awesomely modified rover and towed it into place near Pathfinder. Venkit told me to draw the shape I plan to cut, but he neglected to mention how. It's not like I have a Sharpie that can work out on the surface. So I vandalized Martinez's bed. The cots are basically hammocks. Lightweight string woven loosely into something that's comfortable to sleep on. Every
Okay.
gram counts when making
Figure 8,
seven Mars.
internal hip rotation.
I unraveled Martinez's bed and took the string outside, then taped it to the trailer hull along the path I planned to cut. Yes, of course, duct tape works in a near vacuum. Duct tape works anywhere. Duct tape is magic and should be worshipped. I can see what NASA has in mind. The rear of the trailer has an airlock that we're not going to mess with. The cut is just ahead of it, and will leave plenty of space for the Big Three to stand. I have no idea how NASA plans to power the Big Three for 24.5 hours a day and still have energy left to drive. I bet they don't know either. But they're smart. They'll work something out. 1100 hours, 49 minutes. JPL. What we can see of your planned cut looks good. We're assuming the other side is identical. You're cleared to start drilling. 1200 hours, 7 minutes. Watney. That's what she said. 1200 hours, 25 minutes. JPL.
Forward ball.
Seriously, Mark? Seriously? First,
Right
I
foot forward.
depressurized the trailer. Call me crazy, but I didn't want the drill explosively launched at my face. Then I had to pick somewhere to start. I thought it'd be easiest to start on the side. I was wrong. The roof would have been better. The side was a hassle because I had to hold the drill parallel to the ground. This isn't your dad's Black & Decker we're talking about. It's a meter long and only safe to hold by the handles. Getting it to bite was nasty. I pressed it against the hull and turned it on, but it wandered all over the place. So I got my trusty hammer and screwdriver. With a few taps, I made a small chip in the carbon composite. That gave the bit a place to seat, so I could keep drilling in one place. As NASA predicted, it took about 2.5 minutes to get all the way through. I followed the same procedure for the second hole, and it went much smoother. After the third hole, the drill's overheat light came on. The poor drill wasn't designed to operate constantly for so long. Fortunately, it sensed the overheat and warned me. So I leaned it against the workbench for a few minutes, and it cooled down. One thing you can say about Mars, it's really cold. The thin atmosphere doesn't conduct heat very well, but it cools everything eventually. I had already removed the drill's cowling. The power cord needed a way in. A pleasant side effect is the drill cools even faster, though I'll have to clean it thoroughly every few hours as dust accumulates. By 1700 hours, when the sun began to set, I had drilled 75 holes. A good start, but there's still tons to do. Eventually, probably tomorrow, I'll have to start drilling holes that I can't reach from the ground. For that, I'll need something to stand on. I can't use my workbench. It's got Pathfinder on it. And the last thing I'm going to do is mess with that. But I've got 3 more MAV landing struts. I'm sure I can get a ramp or something.
Cheng shoulder opening.
Anyway, that's
once
all
again
for tomorrow. Tonight is about eating a full ration for dinner. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm either getting rescued on Sol 549 or I'm dying. That means I have 35 sols of extra food. I can indulge once in a while. Log entry. Sol 194. I average a hole every 3.5 minutes. That includes the occasional breather to let the drill cool off. I learned this by spending all damn day drilling. After 8 hours of dull, physically intense work, I had 137 holes to show for it. It turned out to be easy to deal with places I couldn't reach. I didn't need to modify a landing strut after all. I just had to get something to stand on. I used a geological sample container, also known as a box. Before I was in contact with NASA, I would have worked more than 8 hours. I can stay out for 10 before even dipping into emergency air, but NASA's got a lot of nervous Nellies who don't want me out longer than spec. With today's work, I'm about 1/4 of the way through the whole cut. At least 1/4 of the way through the drilling. Then I'll have 759 little chunks to chisel out. And I'm not sure how well carbon composite is going to take to that. But NASA will do it 1,000 times back on Earth and tell me the best way to get it done. Anyway, at this rate, it'll take 4 more sols of boring-ass work to finish the drilling. I've actually exhausted Lewis's supply of shitty 70s TV, and I've read all of Johansson's mystery books. I've already rifled through other crewmate stuff to find entertainment, but all the vocal stuff is in German. Beck brought nothing but medical journals, and Martinez didn't bring anything. I got really bored, so I decided to pick a theme song. Something appropriate. And naturally, it should be something
Change directions.
from Lewis's god-awful 70s collection. It wouldn't be right any other way. There are plenty of candidates. Life on Mars by David Bowie, Rocket Man by Elton John, Alone Again, naturally, by Gilbert O'Sullivan. But I settled on Stayin' Alive by the Bee Gees. Log entry. Sol 195. Another day, another bunch of holes. 145 this time. I'm getting better. I'm halfway done. This is getting really old. But at least I have encouraging messages from Venky to cheer me on. 1,700 hours, 12 minutes. Watney. 145 holes today. 357 total. 1,700 hours, 31 minutes. JPL. We thought you'd have more done by now. Dick. Anyway, I'm still bored at night. I guess that's a good thing. Nothing's wrong with the hat. There's a plan to save me, and the physical labor is making me sleep wonderfully. I miss tending the potatoes. The hab isn't the same without them. There's still soil everywhere. No point in lugging it back outside. Lacking anything tests on it. Amazingly, some of the bacteria survived. The population is strong and growing. That's pretty impressive when you consider it was exposed to near vacuum and subarctic temperatures for over 24 hours. My guess is pockets of ice formed around some of the bacteria, leaving a bubble of survivable pressure inside, and the cold wasn't quite enough to kill them. With hundreds of millions of bacteria, it only takes one survivor to stave off extinction. Life is amazingly tenacious. They don't want to die any more than I do. Log entry. Sol 196.
All right.
I fucked up big time. I made a mistake that might kill me.
Okay, next up, line 4 of the 64. One, two, and back. You can add more of a level drop. So that would be 1, hand comes straight through, 2, drawing up and over, clear, 3. Okay.
I started my EVA around 0800 hours 45
Line 1.
I got my
Move 1.
hammer and screwdriver and started chipping the trailer's hull. It's a pain in the ass to make a chip before each drilling, so I make all the day's chips in a single go. After chipping out 150 divots, hey, I'm an optimist, I got to work. It was the same as yesterday and the day before. Drill through, relocate, drill through, relocate, drill through a third time, then set the drill aside to cool. Repeat that process over and over till lunchtime. At 1200 hours, I took a break. Back in the hab, I enjoyed a nice lunch and played some chess against the computer and kicked my ass. Then back out for the day's second EVA. At 1300 hours, 30 minutes, my ruination occurred. I didn't realize it at the time. The worst moments in life are heralded by small observations. The tiny lump on your side that wasn't there before. Coming home to your wife and seeing 2 wine glasses in the sink. Anytime you hear, "We interrupt this program." For me, it was when the drill didn't start. Only 3 minutes earlier, it was working fine. I had finished a hole and set the drill aside to cool. Same as always. But when I tried to get back to work, it was dead. The power light wouldn't even come on. I wasn't worried. If all else failed, I had another drill. It would take a few hours to wire it up, but that's hardly a concern. The power light being off meant there was probably something wrong with the line. A quick glance at the airlock window showed the lights were on in the hab, so there were no systemic power problems. I checked my new breakers, and sure enough, all 3 had tripped. I guess the drill pulled a little too much amperage. No big deal. I reset the breakers and got back to work. Drill fired right up, and I was back to making holes. Doesn't seem like a big deal, right? I certainly didn't think so at the time. I finished my day at 1700 hours after drilling 131 holes.
Okay.
Not as good as yesterday, but I lost some time with a drill malfunction. I reported my progress. 1700 hours, 8 minutes. 1. 131 holes today, 488 total. Minor drill issue. It tripped the breakers. There may be an intermittent short in the drill, probably in the attachment point of the power line. Might need to redo it. Earth and Mars are just over 18 light minutes apart now. Usually, NASA responds within 25 minutes. Remember, I do all my communication from Rover 2, which relays everything through Pathfinder. I can't just lounge at the hab awaiting a reply. I have to stay in the rover until they acknowledge the message.
Kobu.
1700 hours, 38 minutes. 1. Have received no reply. Last message sent 30 minutes ago. Please acknowledge. I waited another 30 minutes. Still no reply. Fear started to take root. Back when JPL's Nerd Brigade hacked the rover and Pathfinder to be a poor man's IM client, they sent me a cheat sheet for troubleshooting. I executed the first instruction. 1800 hours, 9 minutes. minutes today. The same time the drill died. I tried not to panic. The troubleshooting sheet has a list of things to try if communication is lost. They are in order. 1. Confirm power still flowing to Pathfinder. 2. Reboot rover. 3. Reboot Pathfinder by disconnecting then reconnecting power. 4. Install rover's comm software on the other rover's computer. Try from there. 5. If both rovers fail, problem is likely with Pathfinder. Check connections very closely. Clean Pathfinder of Martian dust. 6. Spell message in Morse code with rocks. Include things attempted. Problem may be recoverable with remote update of Pathfinder. I only got as far as step 1. I checked Pathfinder's connections and the negative lead was no longer attached. I was elated. What a relief. With a smile on my face, I fetched my electronics kit and prepared to reattach the lead. I pulled it out of the probe to give it a good cleaning, as best I could with the gloves of my spacesuit. And noticed something strange. The insulation had melted. I pondered this development. Melted insulation usually means a short. More current than the wire could handle had passed through. But the bare portion of the wire wasn't black or even singed, and the positive lead's insulation wasn't melted at all. Then, one by one, the horrible realities of Mars came into play. The wire wouldn't be burned or singed. That's a result of oxidization, and there's no oxygen in the air. There likely was a short after all, but with the positive lead being unaffected, the power must have come from somewhere else. When the drill's breaker tripped around the same time. Oh, shit. The internal electronics for Pathfinder included a ground lead to the hull. This way it could not build up a static charge in Martian weather conditions. No water and frequent sandblasting can make impressive static charge. The hull sat on panel A, one of 4 sides of the tetrahedron which brought Pathfinder to Mars.
3.
The other 3 sides are still
Right
in
hand.
Palace where I left them. Between panel A and the workbench were the Mylar balloons Pathfinder had used to tumble land. I had shredded many of them to transport it, but a lot of material remained, enough to reach around panel A and be in contact with the hull. I should mention that Mylar is conductive. At 1300 hours 30 minutes, I leaned the drill against the workbench. The drill's cowling was off to make room for the power line. The workbench is metal. If the drill leaned against the workbench just right, it could make a metal-to-metal connection. And that's exactly what had happened. Power traveled from the drill line's positive lead, through the workbench, through the Mylar, through Pathfinder's hull, through a bunch of extremely sensitive and irreplaceable electronics, and out the negative lead of Pathfinder's power line. Pathfinder operates on 50 milliamps. It got 9,000 milliamps, which plowed through the delicate electronics, frying everything along the way. The breakers tripped, but it was too late. Pathfinder's dead. I've lost the ability to contact Earth. I'm on my own. Chapter 18. Log entry. Soul 197. Sigh. Just once. I'd like something to go as planned. You know, Mars keeps trying to kill me. Well, Mars didn't electrocute Pathfinder, so I'll amend that. Mars and my stupidity keep trying to kill me. Okay, enough self-pity. I'm not doomed. Things will just be harder than planned. I have all I need to survive, and Hermes is still on the way. I spelled out a message using rocks. PF fried with 9 M's. Dead forever. Plan unchanged. We'll get to MAV. If I can get to the Ares 4 MAV, I'll be set. But having lost contact with NASA, I have to design my own great Martian window to get there.
Draw back.
For the time being, I stopped all work on it.
Draw back.
I don't want to continue without a plan. I'm sure NASA had all kinds of ideas, but now I have to come up with one on my own. As I mentioned, the big 3, atmospheric regulator, oxygenator, and water reclaimer, are critical components. I worked around them for my trip to Pathfinder. I used CO2 filters to regulate the atmosphere and brought enough oxygen and water for the whole trip. That won't work this time. I need the big 3. Problem is, they soak up a lot of power, and they have to run all day long. The rover batteries batteries have 18 kilowatt hours of juice. The oxygenator alone uses 44.1 kilowatt hours per sol. See my problem? You know what? Kilowatt hours per sol is a pain in the ass to say. I'm going to invent a new scientific unit name. 1 kilowatt hour per sol is... It can be anything. Suck at this. I'll call it a pirate ninja. All told, the big three need 69.2 pirate ninjas. Most of that going to the oxygenator and the atmospheric regulator. The water reclaimer only needs 3.6 of that. There'll be cutbacks. The easiest cutback is the water reclaimer. I have 620 liters of water. I had a lot more before the hat blew up. I need only 3 liters of water per sol, so my supply will last 206 sols. There's only 100 sols after I leave before I'm picked up, or die in the attempt. Conclusion. I don't need the water reclaimer at all. I'll drink as needed and dump my waste outdoors. Yeah, that's right, Mars. I'm gonna piss and shit on you. That's what you get for trying to kill me all the time. There. I saved myself 3.6 pirate ninjas. Log entry. Sol 198.
Alright.
I got a breakthrough with the oxygenator.
Turn in.
I spent most
Draw.
of the day looking at the
Steps.
It heats CO2 to 900 degrees Celsius.
Turn in.
Then passes it over a zirconio electrolysis cell to yank the
Draw.
carbon atoms off. Heating the gas is what
Second.
takes most of the energy.
It's a tough
Why
one.
is that important? Because I'm just
One.
one guy and the oxygenator was made for 6. 1/6 the quantity of CO2 means 1/6 the energy to heat it. The spec says it draws 44.1 pirate ninjas, but all this time it's only been using 7.35 because of the reduced load. Now we're getting somewhere. Then there's the matter of the atmospheric regulator. The regulator samples the air, figures out what's wrong with it, and corrects the problem. Too much CO2? Take it out. Not enough O2? Add some. Without it, the oxygenator is worthless. CO2 needs to be separated in order to be processed. The regulator analyzes the air with spectroscopy, then separates the gases by supercooling them. Different elements turn to liquid at different temperatures. On Earth, supercooling this much air would take ridiculous amounts of energy. But, as I'm acutely aware, this isn't Earth. Here on Mars, supercooling is done by pumping air into a component outside the hat. The air quickly cools to the outdoor temperature, which ranges from negative 150 degrees Celsius to 0 degrees Celsius. When it's warm, additional refrigeration is used, but cold days can turn air to liquid for free. The real energy cost comes from heating it back up. If it came back to the hab unheated, I'd freeze to death. But wait, you're thinking, Mars's atmosphere isn't liquid. Why does the hab's air condense? The hab's atmosphere is over 100 times as dense, so it turns to liquid at much higher temperatures. The regulator gets the best of both worlds. Literally. Side note, Mars's atmosphere does condense at the poles. In fact, it solidifies into dry ice. Problem. The regulator takes 21.5 pirate ninjas. Even adding some of the hab's power cells would barely power the regulator for a sol, let alone give me enough juice to drive. More thinking is required. Log entry. Sol 199. I've got it. I know how to power the oxygenator and atmospheric regulator. The problem with small pressure vessels is CO2 toxicity. You can have all the oxygen in the world, but once the CO2 hits above 1%, you'll start to get drowsy. At 2%, it's like being drunk. At 5%, it's hard to stay conscious. 8% will eventually kill you. Staying alive isn't about oxygen. It's about getting rid of CO2. That means I need the regulator, but I don't need the oxygenator all the time. I just need to get CO2 out of the air and backfill with oxygen. I have 50 liters of liquid oxygen in 2 25-liter tanks here in the hab. That's 50,000 liters in gaseous form, enough to last 85 days. Not enough to see me through to rescue, but a hell of a lot. The regulator can separate the CO2 and store it in a tank, and it can add oxygen to my air from my oxygen tanks as needed. When I run low on oxygen, I can camp out for a day and use all my power to run the oxygenator and the stored CO2. That way, the oxygenator's power consumption doesn't eat up my driving juice. So I'll run the regulator all the time, but only oxygenator on days I dedicate to using it. Now, on to the next problem. After the regulator freezes the CO2 out, the oxygen and nitrogen are still gases, but they're negative 75 degrees Celsius. If the regulator fed that back to my air without reheating it, I'd be a popsicle within hours. Most of the regulator's power goes to heating the return air, so that doesn't happen. But I have a better way to heat it up, something NASA wouldn't consider on their most homicidal day. The RTG. Yes, the RTG. You may remember it from my exciting trip to Pathfinder. A lovely lump of plutonium so radioactive it gives off 1,500 watts of heat, which it uses to harvest 100 watts of electricity. So what happens to the other 1,400 watts? It gets radiated out as heat. On the trip to Pathfinder, I had to actually remove insulation from the rover to vent excess heat from the damn thing. I'll be tapping that back in place because I'll need that heat to warm up the return air from the
Son of a
regulator.
bitch.
I ran the numbers.
Son of a bitch.
The regulator uses 790 watts to constantly reheat air. The RTG's 1,400 watts is more than equal to the task, as well as keeping the rover a reasonable temperature. To test, I shut down the heaters in the regulator and noted its power consumption. After a few minutes, I turned them right back on again. Jesus Christ, that return air was cold. But I got the data I wanted. With heating, the regulator needs 21.5 pirate ninjas. Without it, drumroll, 1 pirate ninja. That's right, almost all of the power was going to heat. As with most of life's problems, this one can be solved by a box of pure radiation. I spent the rest of the day double-checking my numbers and running more tests. It all checks out. I can do this. Log entry. Sold 200. I hauled rocks today. I needed to know what...
So that wasn't pretty, but made it through. There's a lot in line 4, turns out. So we're gonna finish off the day with doing 100 Chuan. It's a drilling movement like this, coming underneath the palm. Do E-by of those, 100 of those, 2 of wall sit, and then I'm gonna drink.
What kind of power efficiency the rover/trailer will get.
All right.
On the way to Pathfinder, I got 80 kilometers from 18 kilowatt hours. This time, the load will be a lot heavier. I'll be towing the trailer and all the other shit. I packed the rover up in the trailer and attached the tow clamps. Easy enough.
Line 7's gonna suck.
The trailer had
All
been
right, Chuan.
pressurized for some time now. There's a couple of hundred little holes in it after all. So I opened both airlock doors to have a straight shot at the interior. Then I threw a bunch of rocks in.
Can added figure eights be like?
The heaviest thing I'll bring with me is the water, 620 kilograms worth. My freeze-dried potatoes will add another 200 kilograms. I'll probably have more solar cells than before, and maybe a battery from the hab, plus the atmospheric regulator and oxygenator, of course. Rather than weigh all that shit, I took a guess and called it 1,200 kilograms. Half a cubic meter of basalt weighs about that much, more or less. After 2 hours of brutal labor, during which I whined a lot, I got it all loaded in. Then, with both batteries fully charged, I drove circles around the hab until I drained them both. With a blistering top speed of 25 kilometers per hour, it's not an action-packed thrill ride, but I was impressed it could maintain that speed with all the extra weight. The rover has spectacular torque, but physical law is a pushy little shit, and it exacted revenge for the additional weight. I only got 57 kilometers before I was out of juice. That was 57 kilometers on level ground, without having to power the regulator, which won't take much with the heater off. Call it 50 kilometers per day to be safe. At that rate, it would take 64 days to get to Schiaparelli. But that's just the travel time. Every now and then, I'll need to break for a day and let the oxygenator use all the power.
Well said.
How often? After a bunch of math, I worked out that my 18 Pirate Ninja budget can power the oxygenator enough to make about 2.5 sols of O2. I'd have to stop every 2 to 3 sols to reclaim oxygen. My 64 sol trip would become 92. That's too long. I'll tear my own head off if I have to live in the rover that long. Anyway, I'm exhausted from lifting rocks and whining about lifting rocks. I think I pulled something in my back. Gonna take it easy the rest of today. Log entry. Sol 201. Yeah, I definitely pulled something in my back. I woke up in agony. So I took a break from rover planning. Instead, I spent the day taking drugs and playing with radiation. First, I loaded up on Vicodin for my back, a rave for Beck's medical supplies. Then I drove out to the RTG. It was right where I left it, in a hole 4 kilometers away.
And stretch.
Only an idiot would keep that thing near the hab. So anyway, I brought it back to the hab. Either it'll kill me, or it won't. A lot of work went into making sure it doesn't break. If I can't trust NASA, who can I trust? For now, I'll forget that NASA told us to bury it far away. I stored it on the roof of the rover for the trip back. That puppy really spews heat. I have some flexible plastic tubing intended for minor water reclaimer repairs. After bringing the RTG into the hab, I very carefully glued some tubing around the heat baffles. Using a funnel made from a piece of paper, I ran water through the tubing, letting it drain into a sample container. Sure enough, the water heated up. That's not really a surprise, but it's nice to see thermodynamics being well behaved. There's one tricky bit. The atmospheric regulator doesn't run constantly. The freeze separation speed is driven by the weather outside, so the returning frigid air doesn't come as a steady flow. And the RTG generates a constant, predictable heat. It can't ramp up its output. So I'll heat water with the RTG to create...
All right, that's the time we have for today. Thank you all for watching. Again, if you have any requests for things to go over after I finish the 64, please add them in the comment section. And as always, take care of yourselves.